Okay, good evening, everybody. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And you did a lot of good eating. So, all right, welcome back. So first, a couple of announcements. This Sunday, December 7th at 10 a.m., we have a wonderful program of our Susan Stumer Cultural Arts with the Gold Coast Art Center. We are hosting author Shira Dicker, who wrote a book of short stories called Lolita at Leonard's of Great Neck and Other Stories from the Before Times. Shira is a lot of fun. I've had several conversations with her planning for this this weekend. She's very engaging, very funny, wonderful storyteller. Our classmate Len Schiff is going to facilitate the conversation with Shira, and she has great insights into Queens and Great Neck of the 70s and 80s, and she grew up around here. Just wonderful stories. So I hope that you can come if you sign up. The registration fee includes a copy of Shira's book, and she will do a book signing. So that's going to be fun. And then also a reminder, if you haven't yet signed up for our spring semester symposium on Maimonides, I hope you will do that. If you sign up before December 12th, you get the early bird registration rate. It will go up after that. And we already have 55 students in the class. So pretty awesome. I love the appetite for Maimonides. And the good thing is that while this class, I know hopefully has been very interesting, but is also quite grim, when we get into Maimonides, there won't be any. It'll just be good, Jewish thought. So I hope you'll sign up for that. Okay, and then a bit of housekeeping for our class. So there's a slight adjustment in the syllabus. I mentioned last week because I had to cancel the course the class 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks, whenever that was. We pushed the syllabus kind of back a week so that we could stay on track. We added a session. So our final session will now be on Tuesday, December 23rd. And our guest speaker on anti-Zionism from the ADL will be here on December 16th instead of December 9th. I realized, though, that last week, we finished up kind of all of Unit 5, whereas I had planned to do 2 sessions on that, but we did the whole thing. So it's okay, actually, because I had only allocated 1 session to Unit 6, but actually I think we need 2. So we are going to move into Unit 6 tonight. We'll continue with it next week. So those of you, David Weiss-Horowitz and Ellen Meyerson, who are signing up to present the readings, you'll do that next week for Unit 6's readings. And tonight, we are going to start with Unit 6, Nazi Antisemitism. So, as you might imagine, this is going to be a very awful unit, but it's just so important, I think, to understand this phenomenon. And I know a lot of us, have, of course, learned about the Holocaust and learned about Nazi Germany and learned about the history of it. And we know, we know things about Nazism, but I'm pretty confident that most, if not all of you, have not encountered the entirety of what we're going to learn in these two units. I think that we are going to gain I think a deep understanding of Nazism as anti-Semitic ideology, of which it is very robust. You know, Nazism is, it's true to say, of course, that Nazism is a racist ideology, you know, and the anti-Semitism of the Nazis was racial anti-Semitism. And we've learned that, we've seen the foundation being laid for that in the German thinkers that we've studied leading up to this point. But Nazism takes it to a whole new level, not only in terms of the heinousness of the genocide, you know, the Holocaust, but as a worldview, an ideology that explains the world is unlike anything that we have encountered in this course, and it is in so many ways the culmination of of everything that we learned in this course. You'll see so much of what we have studied come together in Nazism. Of course, we're going to learn more beyond Nazism in our subsequent units, but this is really a culmination in a lot of ways. So the way we're going to spend our two sessions now, tonight and then next week on Nazism, is tonight we're going to take on the grim task of reading some writings and speeches of Hitler. And then next week, we are going to look at Nazism as an ideology kind of beyond just the person of Hitler, but the product of the project of a whole kind of, battery of people, thinkers and politicians and jurists and whatnot, to gain a fuller sense of it. But of course, Nazism could not have happened without Hitler, and understanding his worldview is important to our understanding of what happened in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. So that's where we're going to start tonight. So it's it's common in Jewish tradition, of course, like when at Purim, when we say the name of Haman, what we do is we boo, we blot out the name of Haman, and we do it in kind of good fun and whatnot. But that booing the name of Haman comes from a place of seeking to erase the memory of the evil man who tried to destroy the Jews. But there's a tension in it, in the tradition itself, over whether we should blot out the name of Haman or remember it. The Shabbat right before Purim is called Shabbat Zachor. It's called that, means the Shabbat of remember. And it's called that because there's a special Torah reading for that Shabbat right before Purim from the book of, now it's either Exodus or Deuteronomy. The passage occurs twice, so I don't remember which one is the special reading for that day. But there's a passage in Exodus and then another one in Deuteronomy that says, remember what Amalek did to you in the wilderness. Amalek is a tribe of people in the Torah who ambush the Israelites as they make their way through the wilderness and attack them from behind, cutting down the most vulnerable of them. And Amalek in Jewish tradition becomes the symbol of evil incarnate. And the Torah says, remember what Amalek did. Do not forget. You must remember. It's a commandment, one of the 613, to remember Amalek. According to our tradition, Haman is a descendant of Amalek. So his evil that he commits against the Jewish people in his generation is in keeping with, you know, the evil of his ancestors. And so we read that passage about Zachor, remember, right before Purim, which tells us don't forget about what they did. You always have to remember it. And then at Purim we read the Megillah and we shout and boo and so forth to drown out the name of Haman every time we hear it. So there's a tension. And I think the same thing is, applies when it comes to Hitler. Of course, when we say his name, it doesn't accompany the same kind of, festive raucousness that happens at Purim when we say Haman. We go, hey, and everyone goes, woo, and it's kind of fun. Haman didn't succeed. That's true. Partially. Yeah. Yeah. But I think also like the remove, we're so far removed from Haman, but Hitler, of course, is close in time to us, and we understand the gravity of his evil, that he did succeed to a much greater degree than Haman did. And there is, I think there's that same tension. On the one hand, I think it feels awkward to think about, studying Hitler, like reading his writings. I mean, who wants to do that? Who wants to remember that this man? It's customary. Some people will say when you mention the name of Haman or the name of Hitler, will be accompanied by the Hebrew phrase Yimach Shemo, which means may his name be erased. At the same time, I think it is very important to study this because, for all the reasons that we can imagine, if you don't understand, what he did and why he did it and how he succeeded in his political and ideological and genocidal projects, then our ignorance makes us vulnerable. So it's with that spirit that I bring this material to you tonight, not because it's a pleasant experience to read Hitler's writings, but because I think it's very important to do it. Okay, so I want to ask you to turn in your prayer books, in your binders, to Unit 6, and we're going to look first at this document right before the green divider that says Adolf Hitler and the Jewish Question. So there's a short article there which either David or Ellen is going to be summarizing, which next week. But we're going to look at on page 205, or the third page in the packet. We're going to look at.
Would you repeat the page?
Yeah. Okay, we're going to look at page 205 of this packet. Adolf Hitler and the Jewish Question. And we're going to look at text number 19 there. the discovery of anti-Semitism in Vienna. Okay. So, this is a long excerpt from Mein Kampf, Hitler's biography. Of course, it's important to understand what it is that we're reading here. I mean, this is his autobiography, which he writes while he's imprisoned in 1924, 25. This has the publication date of 1925. At this point, just in terms of the political biography of Hitler, he's born in Austria and grows up there in Austria. In 1908, he moves to Vienna, where he seeks to pursue studies in art. Does not make it into the art school that he wants to study at, and he struggles mightily with poverty. He's essentially like a homeless man in Vienna, like moving around from these like homeless shelters and whatnot. And in his autobiography, he describes this time in his life as an awakening, and it's for him. It's a political awakening, but really even more than that, it's a kind of quasi-spiritual awakening. And I say that because when we read this, I think we have to understand that this book of Hitler's is takes on the role of essentially a Bible for Nazism. And you probably know that during the Nazi period, that when German couples would get married, they received a copy of Mein Kampf from the state. So, I mean, this plays the role of the Bible in the society, and Hitler describes himself in messianic terms. My teacher, Michael Meyer, with whom I studied anti-Semitism in rabbinic school, he said that, this was not his phrase, I believe he got it from another scholar, but he said that, of course, Nazi anti-Semitism is a racial kind of anti-Semitism, but from Hitler's standpoint, anti-Semitism is redemptive. Hitler's anti-Semitism is redemptive anti-Semitism. We'll see what that means as we read this, but it's a messianic quest in his mind, and this writing, this origin story that he tells, is the foundation for this quasi, religion of Nazism, of which he is essentially the god. So let's look here at the text. Okay, so it says here, Hitler proceeds this early chapter on the Jewish question by an extended treatment of the Social Democrats that ends, quote, only knowledge of Jewry offers the key to grasping the inner and therefore actual intentions of the Social Democrats. Those were political opponents of his. Oh, by the way, who knows, why is Hitler in jail at this time?
It was a rebellion, the Munich Putsch.
Yes, okay, so he leads.
Munich.
Yeah, in 1923, 24, 23, I think. The Nazi Party, of which by this time he's the head of the party, attempts a coup of the Weimar Republic, and it's unsuccessful. And Hitler is tried and imprisoned for leading this effort, and it's while he's in prison that he writes this autobiography. Anyway, so he was in Vienna from 1908 to 1913, and then moves to Germany to avoid being drafted into the Austrian army, but then he serves in the German army in World War One. And then after World War One is where he becomes an activist and ultimately the leader of the nascent Nazi party. I believe in 1919 is when he joins the party and then quickly becomes its leader and most prominent speaker. And he goes around the country speaking about this stuff and riling up crowds. He speaks in beer halls and whatnot. And he has an incredible charisma that draws a lot of attention and a lot of followers. There's an excellent biography on Hitler that I highly recommend. It comes in 2 volumes. The author is Ian Kershaw, Kershaw. He's a British historian, and you know he wrote a very excellent biography of it, and he talks about kind of similar thing to what I said. He's well, why is it important to write biography of Hitler and to understand it? It's not that, of course, he has any affection for the man, but studying him and the phenomenon is so important to understanding history. So, all right, so here he is in the prison in Germany after the coup. Now, he begins. It is difficult today, if not impossible, to say when the word Jew first occasioned special thoughts in me. In my father's house, I cannot recall ever having heard the word, at least while he lived. I believe the old gentleman would have regarded special emphasis on this term as culturally backward. He had succeeded over the course of his life in becoming more or less cosmopolitan, an outlook that survived alongside a quite rough and ready nationalistic sentiment and even colored my own. In school, too, I found no cause that would have led me to change this received image. In high school, I did learn to know a Jewish boy whom we all treated cautiously, only because various experiences had taught us to doubt his reliability. But we didn't care all that much one way or the other about Jews. Not until I was 14 or 15 did I bump into the word Jew more frequently, mostly in the context of political discussions. I felt slightly averse to this practice and could not fend off a feeling of unpleasantness that always came over me when religious squabbles were unloaded in front of me. But at that time, I did not see the question as something special. Linz, that's his hometown in Austria, possessed very few Jews. In the course of centuries, their exteriors had become Europeanized and human-looking. Indeed, I even took them for Germans. The nonsense of this conception was not clear to me because I saw just a single distinctive characteristic, the alien religion. Since they had been persecuted because of it, as I believed, my aversion toward prejudicial remarks about them became almost detestation. Now let's pause there and discuss what we see
Can
here.
you say what the last word is, became what? I didn't know.
Detestation.
Oh, you said that in the matron, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so what do you see in here so far? Ed?
He's sounding like someone who's not prejudiced and not racist
Okay.
and accepting of different people.
Okay, so the story he's telling of himself.
But he's claiming.
Yeah, he's claiming, right? I mean, and this is, who knows? But he's telling about himself a story that as a young person, he didn't know anything about Jews. He was not prejudiced against Jews in any way. Okay, Ivan?
He's also saying it like he's every man, like, we don't know Jews, there aren't that many of them, we don't even think about them. So I'm just like all the rest of you.
Okay, yep. And then in that last paragraph that we read, anything stand out there? Yeah, Adam, do you want to say something?
Yeah, but he's basically thinking they're a different race. That, they became Europeanized, so they look like us, but underneath, they're really different and they're animals.
Yeah, right, so he says they had become Europeanized and human looking. Okay, the implication, I think, being that they're not human. Right, Jerry?
He also refers to religion as alien.
Alien religion. Okay, Lori, did you have something to say? Okay, so this is important, obviously, this statement of that, the exterior had become Europeanized and human looking. Indeed, I even took them for Germans. Okay, what's that? They can fool you. And of course, we've seen this already. This is not new. In maybe the state that the implication that Jews aren't really human is new, but the idea of Jews being, blending in, and fooling the people, that we saw this already in the 19th century German, thinkers. So he's steeped in this stuff by this time in his life. Yeah, Frank.
I'm maybe a small point, but indeed I even took them for Germans. He's in Austria.
Yeah.
Now, that's a separate country,
Mhm.
but he's already joining them as one people.
Yes, the German nationals. So this political philosophy that he's speaking of is called pan-Germanism, which was a major kind of current of politics on the right in the early 20th century. Pan-Germanism, which looks at the Germans are really more the Germanic peoples. Germanic people are, that it's a racial kind of a thing. Whatever country you happen to live in, whatever state jurisdiction people are in, their Germanness is not a function of that. Germanness is a function of their racial essence or their ethnic essence, whatever. And that pan-Germans saw Austria as part of the Germanic peoples. Of course, when Hitler becomes the dictator, the first thing that he does is he conquers Austria or brings them in, through the Anschluss, on this theory of pan-German, ism. All right, so let's keep going. I did not yet so much as suspect the existence of a systematic opposition to Jews. Then I came to Vienna. All right. Now, Vienna in the early 20th century. Anybody have a sense of what that city was about and what it was like in this time period? You're nodding at what?
Well, it was very cosmopolitan.
Yes.
The Jews had a certain section of the ring, and they had aspired and become very important in the culture and the arts
Mhm.
as professionals.
Yeah.
And they were very much separate but accepted.
Okay.
Doing very well.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, in the late 19th century in Vienna is a major center of Jewish artistic creativity. Specifically, though not only, but specifically, musicians who composed music for Reform Judaism. So we all know Shema Yisrael Adonai. That's not just the from Sinai melody of the Shema. That was composed by a man named Solomon Zolzer, who was a Jewish composer in Vienna in this time. There's others too. A lot of the music, classical Reform Judaism, was produced in Vienna, in this time. So that's an important thing to know. And Pat, I think your description is really good. The cosmopolitan center of Europe, maybe. Okay, so Hitler is there. So he says, I didn't know anything about systematic opposition to Jews. Then I came to Vienna. Caught up by the fullness of impressions in the architectonic realm, downcast by the difficulty of my own lot, I did not at first grasp the inner stratification of the people in this gigantic city. I did not see Jews, despite the fact that Vienna already counted 200,000 of them among 2 million people at this time. My eyes and my senses could not keep pace with the flood of values and ideas of the first few weeks. Only when calm gradually returned and the agitated image began to clear, did I look at my new world in a more fundamental way and also come upon the Jewish question. All right, now this phrase, the Jewish question, we've seen it before. What does it mean? What is it referring to?
What do we do with them?
What do we do with Jews? Yeah, why? Yeah, Michael?
The Jews be part of our society.
Yeah,
We get the, what do you call that man, the wandering Jew?
yeah, Ahasuerus.
Ahasuerus.
Yeah,
And can he be integrated into our society?
yeah,
And even, I think one of the writers that said, even if you ignore the religion, they're not organically German.
yeah,
They can't be
yeah.
absorbed into the organic.
Right, yeah, we saw that with the post-emancipation Germans last time. So, yes, it is Judaism / Jews compatible with the broader society? What do we do with them? Is the Jewish question. All right, he goes on. I don't wish to assert that the way I got to know them was particularly pleasant. I still saw only the religion of the Jews, and for reasons of human tolerance, held aloof from attacks on this religion as any other. Consequently, the tone struck by the anti-Semitic press of Vienna appeared to me as unworthy of the cultural heritage of a great nation. The memory of certain occurrences in the Middle Ages oppressed me. I would not wish to see them repeated. Since the papers in question were not generally well thought of, for reasons I had not yet fathomed, I mainly saw them as products of anger and envy, more than as the results of a systematic, albeit false, perspective. By the way, Kershaw says in his biography that based on his analysis of what the sources and stuff and about Hitler's life, that this is all BS. Not surprising that but from Hitler's standpoint, he's telling an origin story, not unlike origin stories of Jesus in the Gospels or Moses in the Ten Commandments, because this is how he sees himself, as a messianic figure. Okay. I was strengthened in my opinion by what appeared to me as the immeasurably more worthy form in which the really big newspapers answered these attacks, or what occurred to me as still more praiseworthy, how they simply failed to mention them at all. That is, condemn them through silence. I zealously read the so-called world press, these different papers, and was amazed by the scope of what it offered its readers, as well as by the objectivity of its individual articles. I respected the aristocratic tone, but was often somewhat uncomfortable with the overstated style. Yet this might have been in keeping with the verve of the whole metropolis. Since I then regarded Vienna in this way, I thought of this explanation of mine as a valid excuse. Note here, the Viennese press's fawning treatment of the Habsburgs and hypercritical treatment of the German Empire and Wilhelm II undermined Hitler's respect. It was this that gradually made me observe the big papers more cautiously. When, on one such occasion, one of the anti-Semitic newspapers, the Deutsches Volksblatt, behaved more respectably, I was forced to recognize it. Another thing that got on my nerves at this time was the way the big papers pursued an obnoxious cult of France. You would have to be ashamed to be a German when these sweet hymns of praise to the great culture nation came before your eyes. More than once, this miserable truckling to the French caused me to drop these, quote, world papers. I then often picked up the Volksblatt, which, although it was certainly smaller, appeared nonetheless somewhat purer in these matters. I was not in agreement with the sharply anti-Semitic tone, but once in a while I read arguments that gave me cause to think. In any case, I slowly came to know from these causes about the man in the movement that determined Vienna's destiny at that time, Dr. Karl Lueger and the Christian Social Party. So Karl Lueger was the mayor of Vienna in this time and a very rabid anti-Semite. Now, up to this point, how would you describe the self-description? Lori.
He's very measured and logical and dispassionate.
Okay, good, Michael.
Not anti-Semitic.
Not anti-Semitic. Yeah, Jerry.
I get the feeling he's leading up to almost saying, well, it's the Jews that caused me to hate them because I started out being accepted.
Okay,
He's
possibly.
laying this groundwork.
Okay, yeah, Pat.
I think it's totally disingenuous. I think he's plotting this way of thinking to draw people in
Mm-hmm.
to what he's eventually going to say.
Yeah,
He wants to
Yeah.
give the feeling of objectivity.
objectivity.
False objectivity.
Yeah. Yeah. So think about the background, the intellectual and cultural background of the time. So we learned, when we were studying the 19th century German writers, we learned about the Enlightenment and the French Revolution and emancipation, all which propounded the values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. There's a universalism, to the Enlightenment, an emphasis on science and rationalism, and a belief that all human beings are equal, and that, and the enterprise of the state, the post-French Revolution state was to give everybody full and equal rights before the law. And we saw the Count Clermont-Tonnerre in the French, assembly saying to the Jews deserve nothing as an entity, or but everything as individual human beings. We saw the Germans saying that the problem with the Jews is that they stubbornly hold on to their national identity and stuff, and they need to give it up and just be part of the regular culture, the same as everybody else, and only then could they be emancipated. So you have that, but then you also have the current that's opposite all of that, the anti-Enlightenment, kind of rationalist current of Romanticism, which we saw in Wagner and one or two of the other German, racial anti-Semites that we read last week, that objects to this universalism, to this idea that everybody's the same. And instead they emphasize the particular national traits of Germans and German culture, and it's special, it's different. You know, this Enlightenment rational stuff is trying to erase everything about Germanness that is special and valuable and meaningful. You know, and that gets into ideas about culture, and you know, the German culture, what it adds to the world, and Jews who are like the wandering, rootless people have no, you know, they're parasites in the culture because they have nothing of their own. They just wander around and latch on to other cultures. So all of this is happening, you know, at this time. And I agree with whomever said, you know, he seems to be describing himself in this first part almost in a very measured and kind of rational way. You know, but then we have to see what happens. Spoiler alert, you know, Hitler rejects the rationalism and the values of the Enlightenment and is heavily influenced by romanticism and nationalism and takes it to extreme levels. But he starts off in this origin story almost as presenting himself as kind of, you know, in keeping with the principles of reason and objectivity. Okay, so then he says, when I came to Vienna, I stood opposed to both, opposed to Lueger, the anti-Semitic mayor, and the Christian Social Party, I guess his party. The man and his movement seemed reactionary in my eyes. My common sense of justice, however, moderated this judgment in proportion to the opportunity I received to get to know the man and his work. Slowly, my just judgment grew into unabashed admiration. Today, I see the man, even more than before, as the greatest German mayor of all times. How much of my basic outlook was changed by this altered position toward the Christian social movement? If by this experience, my views with regard to anti-Semitism also fell to the passage of time, then this was surely the most significant transformation of all for me. It cost me the greatest inner struggles of the soul, and only after months of wrestling between sentiment and reason did reason begin to emerge the winner. 2 years later, sentiment fell into line with reason, and from then on became its most reliable guardian and sentinel. During this period of bitter wrestling between inner education and cold reason, the visual observation of Vienna's streets had rendered invaluable services. There came a time when I no longer, as before, wandered blindly through the mighty city. Now, with eyes opened, I looked at people as well as buildings. As I was once strolling through the inner city, I suddenly happened upon an apparition in a long caftan with black hair locks. Is this a Jew? Was my first thought. They surely didn't look like that in Linz. I observed the man stealthily and cautiously. But the longer I stared at this alien face, examining it feature for feature, the more my first question was transformed into a new conception. Is this a German? All right. So this is like the moment of awakening for him that he describes as an encounter. All right, so what do you see here? What's happening?
I have a question.
Lori.
Is he seeing like the Orthodox Jewish guy dressed like guys in Williamsburg, or is he just making up this like fantasy, do you think?
I mean, I don't know if he's making it up or not, but what he's describing, you know, sounds like you know, like an Orthodox Jew. I mean, this may just all be completely made up, but it doesn't really matter, because what matters is how the man perceives himself and what he does, right? on that basis, yeah.
Even if he didn't actually see him, he knew what they looked like, so
Uh-huh.
say he saw, there's really no difference.
Yeah,
He says an apparition.
yeah, an apparition, okay, so just just the close looking at these words is really important, I think. Okay, first thought, is this a Jew? Remember, because he says, like, I didn't really know Jews, or if I did, they looked like everybody else. Now here, is this a Jew? The longer I stared at this alien face. Okay,
Dorothy has her hand up.
Dorothy, go ahead.
The longer he stood, the more he found it repulsive.
Yes.
And that's the key, I think. There was something in the appearance of the Jew or something that just triggered in him a sense of revulsion. That's quite clear in what he just wrote.
A revulsion. And then, and the term alien face, and then he says, is this a
German.
German?
Yeah, like God forbid that should be who we look like. God forbid we should be associated, right?
Yeah, and I think the statement is that this figure, this Jew may live among us, but he is not of us, not part of us. Okay, I think I see a separating out of Jews, whereas up in this essay, up to this point, he's like, well, you know, they were kind of like, they look, if they were among us, I didn't really know, they look European, whatever. But now he has this is like the equivalent to Paul's, you know, spiritual awakening on the road to Damascus. It's like this is the mythology that he's telling about himself. And now he has this encounter with an apparitional figure that awakens his mind, you know, to this whole truth that he hasn't seen before. Okay. As always in such cases, I began to try to remove my doubts with books. For a few hellers, I purchased the first anti-Semitic brochures of my life. Unfortunately, they all proceeded from the standpoint that in principle the reader was conversant with or even understood the Jewish question to a certain degree. Moreover, their tone was in most cases sufficient to recreate doubts in me, particularly because of the shallow and extraordinarily unscientific support for their assertions. I had a relapse for weeks, on one occasion for months, like a relapse into not hating Jews, I guess. But even that, I mean, that description that the not having revulsion for Jews is like I guess, a sickness into which one can relapse. That now he has this awakening and he understands the world clearly. The matter seemed so monstrous, the indictment so immoderate, that tortured by the fear of doing an injustice, I again became anxious and uncertain. But certainly I could no longer be in doubt that it did not concern Germans of a particular religion, but rather a people in itself. Now remember, we saw both in the Napoleonic Sanhedrin and in references, you know, from the German writers, that there were Jews in the 19th century who rejected the idea of Jewish peoplehood or Judaism as a distinct nation, right? And described themselves as as Frenchmen who happen to believe in the faith of Moses, right? Or Germans, you know, who believe of the Mosaic persuasion, is the phrase, right? We saw that. That was a founding principle of Reform Judaism. Classical Reform Judaism rejected Jewish peoplehood and said that we're Germans or we're Americans. We just have this religion. But Hitler, of course, rejects that. He says it did. I could no longer be in doubt that it did not concern Germans of a particular religion, which is what he thought before. He said the only thing that I noticed about them was that they had an alien religion. It was a different religion, but everything else about them seemed to be just like, you know, other Germans. But here, no, this is a people in itself. Now,
Dr. Karen has her hand up.
yeah, Dorothy, go ahead. Is it Dorothy or
Karen.
Karen, go ahead.
Hi. Reading this, the psychologist in me says this man is already on the edge of a real, almost psychotic break. And when he said he had a relapse, I think he's referring to the bitter wrestling and obviously depression and low self-esteem, his lousy situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear real throes of he calls it an inner moral struggle. I think it's a lot more than that. I think, yeah.
Yeah,
He
I mean,
needed
clearly.
he needed a target for all of this.
Yeah, he's obviously, you know, fanatical, sick maniac. This is Hitler, after all, that we're talking about. But yes, I mean, reading Kershaw's biography is really fascinating. He spends a lot of time talking about Hitler's years in Vienna. I mean, the guy, he was homeless, right? I mean, he was a vagrant. He was going, you know, from these like shelters and sleeping on the streets and, you know, just getting into these shouting matches with people over politics. I mean, the guy is, I don't even know, but it's like, it's just, it's really, you know, a
Our
tortured
current,
existence is what,
I was going to say,
Kershaw described. Yeah,
our president would call him a loser.
a loser.
A
Yeah,
loser.
yeah, I mean, he was a quintessential loser. Totally. Yeah.
And for the most part, the Jews in Vienna were well off.
Uh-huh. Yeah, Jews in Vienna are well off.
And many of them quite rich.
Yeah.
In the Ringstrasse.
Okay, so let's keep going. So he says, it's not Germans of a particular religion, but rather a people in itself. For since I had begun to concern myself with these questions and become aware of the Jews, Vienna appeared to me in a different light than previously. Wherever I went, I now saw Jews. And the more I saw, the more sharply they were distinguished from other men in my eyes. Especially the inner city and the areas north of the Danube Canal swarmed with a people who even externally no longer bore a similarity to Germans. However, if I still had doubts, these hesitations were finally removed by the position of a segment of the Jews themselves. A great movement among them, which was quite extensive in Vienna, came out most emphatically for the confirmation of the racial character of Judaism, Zionism. It might look as though only a section of Jews approved this position, and that the great majority condemned such an affirmation, indeed inwardly rejected it. But upon closer examination, this appearance dissolved in an evil vapor composed of pure expedience and pretext, not to say lies. For the so-called Jewry of liberal disposition did not reject the Zionists as non-Jews, but only as Jews of an impractical stamp, whose public confession of their Jewishness might even be dangerous. In their interrelatedness, nothing had changed. In a short time, this phony struggle between Zionistic and liberal Jews nauseated me. It was thoroughly false, based on lies, and little in keeping with the constantly asserted moral superiority and purity of this people. The cleanliness of this people, moral and otherwise, is a point in itself. Just by looking at their exteriors, even with your eyes closed, you can tell they are not lovers of water. Later, the odor of these caftan wearers often sickened me. Added to this were their unclean clothes and less than heroic appearance. All right. What is your reaction? What is your reaction to the fact that he brings Zionism up here?
Nationalism.
It's a nationalism, Frank?
Well, he's using it as proof that the Jews should and want to go to Palestine. They're not really German, and they know they're not really German, and they don't want to be German.
Yeah, Michael,
Well,
and then Dave.
if that and others say, maybe we should conquer the Holy Land and put the Jews there.
Yeah, David.
I think at this point, he's already put in his mind that he's a nationalist.
Mm-hmm.
And he treats Zionism as a competitive national movement. And that the Jew, by definition at this point, can't be Germanic.
Yeah.
Both for their genetic characteristics, physical characteristics, and this dual or this, non-Germanic nationalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it very all of this is obviously unsettling, but I find it very unsettling in particular the fact that he discusses Zionism in here. I think it's hard.
And the start of the dirty Jew.
Yeah, that's not the start of it. I mean, that's an old trope.
With him.
But it's because he's saying that Zionism is something that Jews, of course, want because they're a different people. They're not German. They're not Germans, and those who claim that they are they're just lying. They're being deceitful. But that Zionism is revealing the true character of Jews as a separate, distinct, race of people. Ed.
Maybe I'm being naive, maybe I'm just not getting this. And we've talked about this concept that Jews were 2% of the population during the Enlightenment. Here, it said earlier that the Jews were 10% population of the end. But if he's just walking around in the streets, he's not seeing 10% of the Jews being Hasidim.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really classical scapegoating.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of this is. I mean, there's no rational basis for the importance that these anti-Semitic writers, give to Jews and so forth, but they do it. All right. So
We have two hands up on Zoom. First Dr.
Okay.
Karen and then Dorothy.
Dorothy, go ahead. Dorothy, was your hand up?
Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
It would seem to me that the logical thing, if he was thinking logically, is if he has such a strong feeling that Zionism is the passion of all the Jews, get rid of him, send them to Zion. Nowhere in here should be the idea.
At first, the Nazi program was doing.
But I mean, ultimately, if this is the passion, if this is what set him off, that he thinks that all Jews are Zionists and they're disloyal, and they'll never integrate.
No, it's not that. It's not that they're disloyal. Other thinkers had said that. That what Jews need to do is give up their Judaism and be loyal Germans. He's saying here that Zionism reveals the truth of what Jews are, that they're their own separate people, their own separate race. They should not try to pretend to be Germans, because they're not. That's what,
It's even
so it's
more
an important
lethal than that, though.
Yeah.
What's that?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Karen, what'd you say?
My point is, yeah, it's more lethal than that, in that he also believes Jews are going to take over the world, that's
Yeah, yes,
their
he does.
mission. And
Yeah,
therefore,
yeah.
not only isn't assimilation possible, get rid of them. They're poisoning the blood, the ideology, the soil. So annihilate them is the next step.
Yeah, for sure. All right, yes, Susan.
I think the sense of opposition, I'm reading this very calm, thoughtful words by this calm, thoughtful person. And it just doesn't jive with, for example, Mein Kampf, and this horrible.
Well, this is Mein Kampf.
Well, if it is Mein Kampf, my visualization of Hitler.
Yeah.
the raving lunatic. And these words
Yeah.
don't come across, no matter what the content is, don't come across as a raving lunatic. It's just well written, and it's thoughtful. and-
It's like, it's not what you expect.
No, not at all. I guess that makes it worse, but, I'm just shocked.
Yeah. Yeah, and then think, everybody, people this is the Bible in Nazi Germany, I mean, they're, so, all right, so let's keep going. All this is far from appealing, but you must be even more offended when you look beyond the physical uncleanliness to discover the moral stains upon the chosen people. Nothing affected me in so short a time as the slowly mounting insight into the kind of activity carried on by Jews in specific areas. Was there any kind of filth or brazenness, particularly in cultural life, in which there was not at least one Jew participating? As soon as you cautiously cut into such an abscess, you would find that, like a maggot in a rotting body, blinded by the sudden light, a little yid. Jewry had much to answer for in my eyes when I got to know its activity in the press, art, literature, and the theater. All their unctuous reassurances were no longer of any use. It was sufficient to observe a billboard, to study the names of the intellectual producers of the horrible trash they advertised for the movies and theater, to become hardened for a long time. This was the pestilence, intellectual pestilence, far worse than the Black Death of long ago, with which the people were being infected. And in what quantities was this poison being produced? Naturally, the lower the intellectual and moral level of such art fabricators, the greater their fertility, until the rogues, like garbage sorters, splash their filth in the face of humanity. Just think, for every Goethe, nature can easily come up with 10,000 such polluters of the environment, who now poison the soul like gem carriers of the worst sort. Okay, so now it's getting a lot more graphic and, passionate and whatnot, but here he's talking about the poisoning of culture. Okay, and this is Wagner. This is inherited from that romantic tradition of Jews as poisoners of culture, but he's talking like all the filth, everything in the cosmopolitan city, and all of the pornography and the gross stuff and things that are poisoning people's minds. The Jews are all behind all of it. Yes, Jerry.
When they had that interview with Fuentes, we watched that podcast.
Yeah.
He brought up again with the pornography.
Yeah.
the Jews.
Yeah. These themes, we see it. It's just, and it's coming up again now. And I think if we have the ability to recognize this in, you know, when you hear like the Fuentes or other people, whoever might migrate into the mainstream and they are talking in these terms, it's very dangerous. This is Hitler, what he's saying. Okay. It was horrifying but undeniable that just the Jew in abundant numbers seemed chosen by nature for this shameful destiny. Is this the chosenness of the Jews? I now began to examine my beloved world press from this viewpoint. The more fundamentally I probed the object of my erstwhile admiration, the more it withered. Its style became ever more unbearable. The content I had to reject as inwardly corrupt and superficial. The objectivity of the reporting seemed to me now to partake more of lying than the honest truth. Ah, but the authors were Jews. Thousands of things I had scarcely noticed before now appeared noteworthy to me. Other things that I had thought about, I now learned to grasp and understand. I now saw the liberal slant of this press in a different light. Its aristocratic tone in answering of attacks, as well as their condemnation to silence, were revealed to me now as clever and shabby tricks. Encomiastic theater criticism was always reserved for Jewish authors, and their rejections never fell upon any but the Germans. In the needling of Wilhelm II could be discerned the constancy of its methods, exactly in the same way as the commendation of French culture and civilization. The kitschy contents of the novellas now became unacceptable to me, and in their language, I detected the sounds of an alien people. However, the sense of the whole was so inimical to Germandom that it could only have been intentional. But in whose interest was this? Was it all an accident? Gradually, I became unsure. However, the process was accelerated by insights that I gained in a series of other events. I refer to the general conception of ethics and morals as openly exhibited by a large part of Jewry, and that could be visibly substantiated. Here again, the streets offered a frequently and truly evil instructional lesson. The relationship of Jewry to prostitution, and still more to the white slave traffic, could be especially well studied in Vienna, as in no other city of Western Europe, with the possible exception of the ports of southern France. Walking of a night the streets and alleys of Leopoldstadt, you witness everywhere, whether you want to or not, encounters that remained hidden from the greatest part of the German people until the war presented soldiers on the Eastern Front occasion to see similar things, or more aptly put, forced them to see such. The first time I recognized the Jews directing this disgusting traffic and vice, shamelessly in an ice-cold business fashion, a cold shudder ran down my back. But then it inflamed me. Now I no longer avoided discussion of the Jewish question. No, now I welcomed it. But as I had learned to look for the Jew in all the areas and manifestations of cultural and artistic life, I suddenly happened upon him in a place where I least expected to do so. When I discerned the Jews as leaders of the Social Democrats, the scales fell from my eyes. The long struggle of the soul thereupon concluded. Even in the daily relations with my fellow workers, I saw an astonishing adaptability. How within the space of a few days or even a few hours, they adopted altered positions on the same question. It was difficult for me to understand how men who, when spoken to privately, still had some reasonable views, immediately lost them as soon as they came under the spell of the masses. This happened often enough to make me despair. When after hours of persuasion, I was convinced that this time I had finally broken through the ice, or that I had cleared up some nonsense and rejoiced in having done so, I would on the next day, to my grief, have to begin all over again. It had all been in vain. Like the eternal pendulum, their views seemed to swing back again and again to madness. All right, let's skip forward. Okay, to 211. Let's look at 211. 3/4 of the way down the page. One thing had become clear to me. Well, first above there he says, from publishers on down, they were all Jews. And he's talking about the socialists and stuff, they're Jews. And then one thing had become clear to me, the leadership of the party, with whose petty members I had been carrying on a violent battle for months, lay almost exclusively in the hands of an alien people. That the Jew was no German, I now knew to my inner satisfaction and with finality. Only now did I learn to know the seducers of our people completely. The year of my sojourn in Vienna had sufficed for me to become convinced that no worker could be so stubborn as to be beyond better knowledge and better explanations. Okay, let's now down a little further there. Never, however, was a Jew to be freed from his viewpoint. I was still childlike enough at that time to want to make the madness of their doctrine clear to them. I talked my tongue sore and my throat hoarse and thought I must succeed in convincing them of the harmfulness of their Marxist insanity. In fact, I achieved just the opposite. It seemed as though the mounting insight into the nihilistic effect of social democratic theories and their realization only served to strengthen them in their determination. So he's arguing with socialists. All right, now let's turn to the last page, 213. The 213 at the top there. From a weak cosmopolitan, I had become a fanatical anti-Semite. That's the journey he's describing. Just one more time, it was the last, I was visited by the deepest anxiety and oppressive thoughts. As I scrutinized the effects of the Jewish people over long periods of human history, suddenly there arose the fearful question, did an unknowable destiny, for reasons unbeknownst to us poor men, perhaps wish with eternal and immutable decision that the final victory go to this little nation? Could it be that this people, which lives only for the earth, will be granted it as a reward? As I calmly and clearly deepened my knowledge of Marxism, and thus the effects of the Jewish people, destiny itself gave me the answer. The Jewish doctrine of Marxism rejects the aristocratic principle of nature and sets in its place the eternal privilege of power and strength of the mass and the dead weight of its members. This is important for our study next week in terms of Nazi ideology, beyond Hitler. His objection to Marxism. And first of all, it's ironic, of course, that he's identifying Marxism as a Jewish phenomenon when we saw Karl Marx wrote hideously about Jews, right? But he identifies Jewishness and Marxism with each other because Marxism advocates radical equality of everybody. And what he's saying here is that it rejects the aristocratic principle of nature. That the idea of equality, of everyone as equal before a law, is a perversion of nature. Okay, we're going to see this next week more clearly. But it's as Hitler sees it, it's part of how Jews pervert the world through these kinds of ideas. It therefore denies the value of the human personality, contests the significance of nationality and race, and therewith withdraws from humanity the basis of its existence and culture. As a foundation of the universe, this doctrine would bring about the end of any intellectually comprehensible order. And thus, as in this, the greatest recognizable organism. The realization of such a law could result only in chaos and ultimately death for the inhabitants of this planet. If the Jew, with the help of his Marxist creed, is victorious over the peoples of this world, then his crown will be the funeral wreath of humanity. Then this planet will travel through the ether as it did millions of years ago, devoid of men. Eternal nature avenges itself mercilessly on the transgression of its commandments. Thus, I believe today that I am acting according to the will of the Almighty Creator. When I defend myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the Lord. Okay, and that's why Professor Meyer describes Hitler's anti-Semitism as redemptive anti-Semitism. Okay, because by ridding the world of Jews, he's saving the world. He's saving humanity. All right. So, what are your reactions to reading this long excerpt from Hitler? Michael.
He was an evil person, not just a raving lunatic. He was not a raving lunatic. If you look at just the way he puts it together, all the pieces fit. It might not make something that we recognize as something pretty, but it fits, not disorganized.
Yeah, that's an important insight of Ian Kershaw in his book, and he talks about, there's some good interviews with him out there, that he says that people make the mistake of saying that Hitler was a madman. And he says that to make that claim is dangerous because it wipes away the evil of what is here. He says Hitler was not a madman. I highly recommend the search for interviews with Ian Kershaw. It's really good.
Really,
Yeah.
this makes me sad. You really can't call even someone who wants to be a dictator a Hitler. Maybe a Mussolini you could call him, but not a Hitler.
Yeah.
This is consummate evil.
Consummate evil, yeah. Pat?
But I see it also as an intentional political document to persuade from being rational to irrational in a way that takes people along with him, which was probably part of his charisma when he got out into the public.
Yeah,
I think it was an intentional attempt to manipulate the reader.
Yeah. This origin story kind of, does that. I mean, yeah, I agree.
You have three hands up on Zoom.
Okay, Saul, go ahead, Saul.
Yeah, I think I'm just going back to what you said a few minutes ago, but reading this and recognizing we're 80 years after this period in our lives. It's not that long ago, and we hear the same rhetoric today and we ignore it.
Yes, I agree.
That's where my fear and my anxieties come from.
Very scary. Yeah, Adam.
The common theme in people who have genocide ideologies is to assume that the people they're against are animals and are subhuman. And if you listen carefully to what even is going on today, the people in those boats with the narcotics are animals. Therefore, we have the right to kill them. And that gives, and if they're human beings like us, we can't kill them.
Yeah.
But if they become animals, we can.
Yeah,
This is
dehumanization.
a common theme.
For sure, yeah. Karen, go ahead. Karen, did you want to say something? Okay, Dorothy, go ahead.
So, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thinking of is now. And I'm thinking of Epstein and the Epstein case and all of that horrible sexual perversion that is
Yeah,
being exposed there under the name
yeah,
of Epstein. I mean, how many,
yeah,
let's be honest with each other. Every time I hear of something terrible happening on the stock market or in some scandal like this, my first thought is, please don't let him be Jewish, right?
yeah,
I'm sure I'm not
yeah,
alone in this, right? And now we have
yeah,
all of this about the Epstein case. And in
yes,
addition to that, here's the irony. We have someone who was elected as a Democratic socialist. So he should
yeah,
be pro-Jew according to this doctrine. And instead, he is very anti-Semitic, I think, in many ways, although he denies it because he does have some agreeable rabbis who are with him. But I think that we're in a very dangerous moment. And that's not a newsflash to any of us here. I'm only
yeah,
praying that somehow, with your genius and your leadership, at the end of this course, we're not all joining together on the Washington Bridge to jump off into the river. At the end of this course, we'll have a
yeah.
little line of hope or
I
a,
hope so. I
I
gotta figure
certainly hope
something
so,
out.
because it's looking,
Okay,
jump off that bridge when we come to it kind of thing. Okay. No, but
Susan.
seriously, it's a very, very provocative combination of
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you, Susan. Go ahead. I can't hear you. I'm
I
sorry.
was really afraid to approach this unit, but it, just in this particular, he wrote this. It's not, it doesn't sound so scary to me, but you know, this is where I'm, he's just writing and he seems very lucid and he's had different opinions and people, we do, a lot of people, it's not the crazy making that
Yeah,
anything I see, the newsreels in the thirties and forties that, you know, parents saw, that's
yeah.
a lunatic.
For sure. So that you're raising a really important question, which is how does it go from this, what Hitler's, which is it's gross and I mean ravings about you, but how does it become the Holocaust? That's a major distance to travel, right? So so in next session, we're going to learn about, see, it's, although Nazism obviously could not have happened without Hitler and his driving anti-Semitism, or his anti-Semitism as a driving force, the ideology goes well beyond him. And we're going to read next time how this worldview is constructed so that the Holocaust becomes the logical outcome of it. But I agree that just reading this doesn't, if you didn't, we obviously know the history, so we say like, oh yeah, of course he's going to do the Holocaust. But I think a close reading of it doesn't make that an inevitable conclusion of these statements. But the world view that's constructed from him, it does make it. So we'll see. But I want to show you to finish up our
I have
session.
one comment yet in the Zoom that wanted transmitted
ahead.
from Lourdes. When we visited
Yeah.
the Holocaust and Civil Rights Museum in Dallas, the parallel between our political leader and the raising of Hitler sound almost identical, very scary-like. And also Karen has her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Karen,
wanted
go
to bring
ahead.
attention. Page 139, 140. I know we're breaking up. But Hitler reportedly told an intimate associate, I know perfectly well that in the scientific sense there is no such thing as race. As a politician, I need a conception which enables the order which has hitherto existed on a historic basis to be abolished and an entirely new order in force.
Yeah.
And that leads
That's quoted
to
in the
the
Prager resolution.
exposure.
Yeah.
One
Yes.
other
Okay.
statement, malignant narcissism is a definition of psychopathy in the American Psychiatric Association's definition of mental illness. You don't have to be a raving madman to be a
Yeah.
malignant narcissist.
Right, yeah.
And when the
so
world
he
around
sees
around
himself
you
as
and your
inside.
malignant thinking, then you get a Hitler or a dictator of such malignant effect.
For sure. Okay, so for the last few minutes that we have, I want to ask you to turn now in your unit section behind the green divider. The second packet behind the green divider has the title page, A Holocaust Reader. Okay, a Holocaust Reader. I want to invite you to pull that out. And we're going to look at another couple of short excerpts from Hitler, other things that he says. So if you turn to the first page behind the cover page there, it says Adolf Hitler and the Annihilation of the Jews. Now he writes this letter to Adolf Himmler, September 16th, 1919. This is before Mein Kampf, before what we read. This is when he's just kind of joined the party, the Nazi party, or what would become the Nazi party. He says here, anti-Semitism as a political movement should not and cannot be determined by factors of sentiment, but only by the recognition of facts. These are the facts. To begin with, Jewry is unqualifiedly a racial association and not a religious association. Its influence will bring about the racial tuberculosis of the people. Okay, so we talked about that last week a little bit, how Hitler and Nazism is looking at this category of race as a biological category, the people, the German people, as a biological entity, and the presence of this foreign race amongst them threatens to disease the vermin, threatens to infect the body of the Germanic peoples. So the idea of racial tuberculosis of the people. Hence it follows, anti-Semitism on purely emotional grounds will find its ultimate expression in the form of pogroms. Rational anti-Semitism, however, must lead to a systematic legal opposition and elimination of the special privileges which Jews hold, in contrast to the other aliens living among us. Its final objective must unswervingly be the removal of the Jews altogether. Only a government of national vitality is capable of doing both, and never a government of national impotence. Prager and Telushkin say in their chapter that they say that there's a mistake to think that just to call the Nazis racists and the Jews happen to be another race, and so they oppose Jews. Prager and Telushkin say that the entire purpose of Nazism was to destroy the Jews, and that they sought power in order to do that. Okay, and Hitler makes that clear right here in 1919.
That's 6 years before his rational explanation.
Exactly, 6 years before his rational explanation. Looking at the next text, a speech from 1920. If we wish to carry out these social reforms, then the struggle must go hand in hand against the opponents of every social arrangement, Jewry. Here too, we know exactly that scientific understanding can only be a preparation, that after understanding must come organization, which changes over into deed, and the deed remains irrevocably firm. Removal of the Jews from our nation, not because we would begrudge them their existence, we congratulate the rest of the world on their company, but because the existence of our own nation is 1,000 times more important to us than that of an alien race. Okay, and then on the top of the next page, and this is, wait, that's not the one that I, 1922. There are only two possibilities in Germany. Do not imagine that the people will forever go with the middle party, the party of compromises. One day it will turn to those who have most consistently foretold the coming ruin and have sought to dissociate themselves from it. And that party is either the left, and then God help us, for it will lead us to complete destruction, to Bolshevism, or else it is a party of the right, which at the last, when the people is in utter despair, when it has lost all its spirit and has no longer any faith in anything, is determined for its part ruthlessly to seize the reins of power. That is the beginning of the resistance of which I spoke a few minutes ago. Here too, there can be no compromise. There are only two possibilities: either the victory of the Aryan or annihilation of the Aryan and the victory of the Jew. Okay, so this lends support to Prager and Terlushkin's thesis that scapegoating and everything was not the extent of Hitler's worldview on Jews. That his overarching aspiration was to destroy the Jews from the beginning. And then he says, let's look for the last text. The bottom of the next page, 32, and then this will take us into next week, where it says, from Hitler's Reichstag address, January 30, 1939. So now he's the dictator. And one more thing I would like now to state on this day, memorable perhaps not only for us Germans. I have often been a prophet in my life and was generally laughed at. During my struggle for power, the Jews primarily received with laughter my prophecies that I would someday assume the leadership of the state and thereby of the entire Volk, and then, among many other things, achieve a solution of the Jewish problem. I suppose that meanwhile, the then resounding laughter of Jewry in Germany is now choking in their throats. Today I will be a prophet again. If international finance Jewry within Europe and abroad should succeed once more in plunging the peoples into a world war, then the consequences will be not the Bolshevization of the world and therewith a victory of Jewry, but on the contrary, the destruction of the Jewish race in Europe. Okay, so we'll stop there, and we have now laid the foundation for next week, where we read from this book called The Law of Blood, Thinking and Acting as a Nazi. It's really a fascinating book. The author is not a Nazi, he is a modern historian. He did an extensive historical analysis of Nazi texts, and wrote this book about how the Nazis saw themselves and how they understood what they were doing. And we will see in there the construction of this robust ideology based on, of course, Hitler's anti-Semitism, that becomes clear that the eventual outcome can only be what happened, the Holocaust. Yeah, Eric.
Its focus is so one-dimensional. Why do you think it wastes energy on the Roman people, homosexuals, and all these other groups?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, but it's clear that his obsession with Jews is unique from anything else.
It's called The Rest is History.
Yes.
And it's a two-part series.
Yes, that's a great interview. I highly recommend it. And I'll ask Judy to send it out tomorrow. The interview with Ian Kershaw.
Rest is History.
Yeah, it's excellent. Okay, thank you for your perseverance through this very difficult material. And Dorothy, we all need to think together about the positive conclusion to our class. But in the meantime, thanks everybody for participating. I'll see you next week.
I'm counting on you.